Hello and welcome to the Afri Show. My name is Freeman Singirankabo, and thank you so very much for joining our program today. Those of you joining us live, especially if you're joining us live from the social media like Facebook and YouTube, welcome. We are so pleased that you can find some time out of your busy schedule and join us today. Even those of you joining us live from the televisions or radio station, we are so thrilled that you too are able to follow our program today. Please share these programs with your friends, families, and co-workers, and we encourage you to come and be a part of it. We have our Zoom session open for each and every one of you who would love to have a part in this conversation. Every time we have a program going on here at Afri Show, we speak frankly with all of you. We speak boldly and we speak with no apologies. Why? Because the issues we discuss here, these are the issues that we care so deeply about, very close to our hearts. And it is for this reason, everything we get to discuss with you, it is all in the spirit of truth, love, and trust. And these are the benchmarks by which we would love each and every one of you to measure both the integrity and the content of everything that we discuss with you guys here on the show. And we also welcome all of you feedbacks. Whatever kind of feedbacks that you have, we would love to hear from them. Why? We would love to know what is it that you like about the programs that we are bringing to you. What is that you don't like? Whatever you do not like, we can actually also do our due diligence to make some changes so that it is something that we may actually find helpful to all of you. If you find something also that you do like, please consider supporting us, because this entire show is fully financed by us, our Free Dominion team, and affiliates. So we would love that you also give us a hand so that we may actually broaden the broadcast of this conversation, even the distribution. A huge thanks to networks that are carrying our message today. In particular, a huge thanks to HMG Network and its affiliates for having agreed to air our program. It's truly humbling, and it's such a privilege that we get an opportunity to actually appear to all of you guys. And at the same time also, you all have an opportunity to voice your own opinion and be the beacon of the voiceless amongst your family members, your community, even your countries. So, what is a Free Dominion show and what is a Free Dominion? I always start from there because this is a brand new show that we just started, and it's only fair that for those of you who are stumbling on this show, especially if you are linking up with us straight from the social media, at least you get an idea what it is that we do here, why we're on air, why we're broadcasting. So Afri Dominion, it's an idea that inspires, advocates, encourages, and help for a complete and total dominion of Africa, one country at a time, by its sons, daughters, and African descendants, all in the interest of African people primarily, and the rest of the world afterwards. So the show itself, in the show we are also a mouthpiece of the idea. You can expect that all our conversations here at Afri Dominion, the conversation we have here, the programs that we have here, are meant and are explicitly supposed to be inspiring. They are explicitly supposed to be advocating on your behalf. And they are explicitly supposed to be encouraging and help, both words-wise but also in practice. A complete total Afri-Dominion takeover, management, governorship, the entire dominion of Africa, all by its sons, daughters, and African descendants, one country at a time. So this is essentially what you can expect from our broadcast. Now, the themes that we have, since the idea has, it's really big, we have 5 different themes, hence 5 different days. We broadcast for 5 days, Monday all the way to Friday, 12 to 1:30 p.m. And Mondays we talk about eradication of African refugees and African stateless person. On Tuesdays we talk about the Constitution, law and policy review and implementations. On Wednesdays we get to talk about our testimony, and we get an opportunity to write our own history, our own ways. On Thursdays we get to talk about the spirit of dominion, and Friday we get to talk about current events and its impact towards Africa and African people. Each and every one of those themes has plenty of programs that we actually get to you guys, or we get to broadcast. And by the way, each and every one of you is welcome. If you have an idea, if you have something that you would like to share with the rest of our brothers and sisters all over Africa, but also all over the world, welcome. We would love to have you. Be sure to tune in to us, be sure to reach out to us, and we will do the rest. How can you get in touch with us? You can come straight to our website, www.afridominion.com, or you can shoot us an email at info@afridominion.com, info@afridominion.com. When you get to the website, you can also find our telephone number, our social media handlers, as well as the group that we are involved in or that we belong to. By all means, a huge welcome. Come and join us, because there are so many like minds, those who are headed the same direction, same destinations, and it would be nice if we can also find you there. With that in mind, today is Wednesdays, and we are absolutely going to do what we do best on Wednesdays. It's our testimony time. Also, apologies in advance. Today we are going to have only 1 hour broadcast because we have another pre-engagement that we have to honor. So apologies to all of you. There is a bit of a conflict in our scheduling today, and we are going to actually end the broadcast in 52 minutes. Today we want to talk about our testimonies, our history, and I want to also let you know, guys, that Wednesdays is for all of us. It is for all of us, which means you are welcome to tell your story. You are welcome to write your own history. One of the reasons being that we actually do this openly, we want to make sure that this time around, we get to drive our own history. We get to preserve our own history, not the outsiders. Gone are the days where we can actually complain that we don't have a history, because we know that African history has been purposely buried. Such a rich history, or it's become a collective item for some wealthy person out there, while we know that it's supposed to be the people's history. So we want to make sure that we do not fall in the same predicament all over again. We know that when governments take power, they actually cherry pick which history to preserve and which history to destroy. This is a disservice to humanity. If we do not know our history, the past, the present, how can you see the future? So how can you plan the future? Hence, us taking an active approach to actually remediate that. So, as you are fully aware, I am going to continue what I've left off. By the way, I'm not the only one who has to speak. It so happened that none of you guys are coming to talk about your own history. So guess what? We don't waste our airtime. I get to talk about my own testimony. And I want to actually give you guys a huge welcome. Those of you also who would love to share, we would very, very, very much love to accommodate you. Why? Because it is what we are doing, and it is what we must do. Okay? So I literally want to let you know, guys, that everything that we are doing, we're doing it because we truly believe in preserving our history, our own way, by our own people. Hence, you seeing us here today. So the last time I was sharing with you how we arrived to the United States, my family and I, all of us, when we arrived here in the United States, we went through a lot. We went through a lot, and we had to learn how to very, very, very quickly adapt to the United States. Most of you may be wondering, how is that possible? What happened? So I will just do a quick recall to those of you who didn't get a chance to follow my last testimony. We arrived here early March 1995. Yes. Actually, no. Third week of March 1995. It must have been somewhere between the dates, the 20th and the 23rd, somewhere around there. I don't quite remember, but I know it was literally within one of those 3 days. We were received by one of the embassy personnel. His name was, he was a chargé d'affaires back then, Joseph Mutabowa. He's one of the guys who actually received us from the airport, and he took us in to a hotel, in Washington, D.C. And he was a pretty good dude, actually. Pretty decent dude. I would imagine that he was a seasoned politician, I would imagine, or seasoned diplomat, you may say. Or he at least knew public relation, if you may want to put it that way. So he pretty much shows around. He was like our chaperone for at least a couple of weeks because we knew nothing about America. So pretty much he showed us around. And then I remember I believe we stayed in a hotel for a few days, no more than 1 week. And then he found us a place to live. I believe he found us in an apartment. Now, don't get me wrong. I may have some of these things wrong, but I think it may be him who found us a place to live, given that he was the one who knew the place around. So we went to live in this place, not so far from the embassy of Rwanda in Washington, D.C. So we went there, and we stayed for, I think, a month or so, something like that. Now, some of these details are a bit sketchy. If whatever that I can't recall, I will just plainly tell you up front. But I know somebody who would know for sure. And these will be my parents. But since I'm telling my own story, they can fill in the gaps whenever possible, or when they get to it. So I remember we moved into a very nice apartment. Those of you who may know Washington, D.C., actually, no, I'm not going to tell you because I think I got it in my book. I was going to tell you the apartment that we moved in, but it was a really nice apartment, not so far from the embassy. So we lived there, and then eventually money became a problem. I think the government of Rwanda, they were running behind sending funds to Washington, D.C. How do I know I ever heard of that? So eventually we had to move out of the apartment, and we moved we moved into the embassy. So the embassy is a huge building that had vacated floors with nobody in it. So I suppose my parents, they talked to Chargé d'Affaires, Joseph, that, hey, we need to move in so that this whole money problem doesn't have to stick to us. And those of you guys who know Rwanda, when we moved in the United States, if my memory serves me correct, $1 was between probably 200 to 300 francs. Okay? And the amount of money renting an apartment in Washington, D.C. was in thousands, okay? Dollars. I want you guys to do the math, okay? And that salary in Rwanda, I guess very few people could afford to have that. So now imagine the Rwandese government is not paying the bills. Now my parents are left to fill in the gaps. So it was gonna be impossible. You got a bunch of kids to feed, some mouth to feed. Minding you also that American food is so expensive. I mean, seriously, it's like you get to learn a whole new life altogether about the West, about Europe, and so on. So when you don't have money, you cannot afford Washington, D.C. The same is true today. Washington, D.C., it's one of the most expensive cities in the world. One of the most expensive cities in the world. It was still true back then too. So essentially, the whole money problem led us to move into the embassy of Rwanda. You may be wondering, how did you guys get to the embassy? My parents, they work for the embassy. That's why. So I want to make sure that it's also clear that that's how we moved to the embassy. So at the embassy, we lived there for probably over one year. Yeah. Big building, definitely huge, for real. Those of you who don't know where the embassy of Rwanda is in Washington, D.C., it's on a street they call New Hampshire Avenue. This is like Rwanda in the United States. I just want you guys to know that. It's a house of the people. Embassy is a house of the people. It's like a country. It's like a land of a country. So we went and lived there, and for 1 year. 1 year and a couple months, I think. And so at some point, Chargé d'Affaires Joseph Mutaboba was given some other mission. He had to go because the new ambassador was arriving, who was Theogene Rudasingwa. So when he left, we had got used to living there. We were enrolled to school. I mean, as kids, we did what we did. We did what kids do, you know. And so we lived there. All is good and all of that. And the new ambassador comes, and close to a year, a bit of friction starts until one day on Friday afternoon, we come from school. We can't get to the embassy. The doors were locked. We check our keys. Nothing is opening. So what had happened? The new ambassador, Theogene Rudasingwa, had gotten the doors of the embassy changed. The locks, he changed them when we had gone out to school anyway. And I believe my parents, they weren't there. They may have gone to work or something. I don't know what was up with them. But the bottom line, they came to get us from school, and when we arrived at the embassy, we couldn't get in. Minding you, that was our residence. So we started fussing. And of course, you know Rwandese people. They were like, hello, hello, hello. I mean, they were kind of hysterical. I remember that day. They were like, well, something is wrong with the keys, because they didn't know what had happened. And eventually, one of the new guy who had just arrived with the ambassador Theurgen, so he literally came in the window. He was like, you know how you peep in the window, like you're peeping for like a stranger? So he was basically trying to see who was knocking so rough. But they could hear us because we were talking in Kinyarwanda. So eventually it was like, well, you are not allowed in here. And then we're like, come again? So the guy was like, you are not allowed in here. And we were like, what do you mean we are not allowed in here? This is Rwanda. This is our country. Who, you know, how dare you? You tell us we are not allowed here. And so he goes on, he's like, the ambassador says you cannot come in. And so we're like, you must be joking. We live here. This is our country. How dare you tell us that we cannot come home? I mean, the men insisted. So eventually, a postman came. And he had a letter that needed to be signed. Okay? So the man comes in and he knocks. And as usual, those guys, they peep in. And he's like, I have a delivery. So, of course, they could not refuse to receive mail. And someone had to sign for it. Okay? So, when the postman knocked and when they opened, guess what? We pushed the door and we got in. And of course, they couldn't do anything about it. It was just one guy. So, and as soon as we got in, I remember my mother, she went to the office that she was, her own office. She tried to open, it was locked. I mean, they literally changed everything. Probably was changed like in the middle of the afternoon or something, because in the morning, we left the locks working, but in the afternoon, nothing was working. And conveniently, the ambassador, either he had hidden, he wasn't around, or he had given himself some sort of things to do so that he didn't have to deal with us. So essentially they were like, you are no longer invited here, you are no longer welcomed here. So we found it so strange, especially for us kids. We were like, okay, what are we gonna do? I mean, we were sort of like wondering what was going to happen. So we sat down. They couldn't even allow us to go upstairs to our own residence. So since we didn't want to make a scene, we just complied. We sat down in the guest room on the main level by the embassy, and we waited. And we waited for quite some time. And of course, in between, there were exchange of words between my parents and the staff who was there. And eventually, there were a couple of staffs actually who were there. And eventually, they were like, you have to go. We said, we're not going anywhere. And they insisted that we had to go. But of course, because they couldn't force us out, they called the State Department. And to those of you who do not know, the State Department is in charge of the security of all embassies in Washington, D.C., of all ambassadors and the guests of the United States. And before you know it, the Secret Service arrived to the embassy. And when the Secret Service arrived to the embassy, they were like, what's going on? So by that time, the ambassador, Theurgen Rudasingwa, he called the State Department and said that the embassy had been invaded by Interahamwe. That's what the police told us. So the police came prepared to fight Interahamwe in the embassy. And because it was the ambassador who explicitly requested that they come to the rescue, those guys, they only came with one and only one agenda: to neutralize the threat. So they arrive in the embassy, and then, of course, those guys who were telling us to get out of the building, they were like, it's them. So these guys, they're looking at it, they see a bunch of kids, and they see, and they see two parents. So they sort of like were confused, but then they were like, okay, it is what it is. So they were like, you guys have to go. And we said, no, this is our country. And they were like, again, we're not going to force you to get out, but you have to go. They insisted. And when they realized we weren't going, they were like, so now you have two choices. You're either going to get out of this building by force and in handcuffed. We're going to have to arrest you. Or you would have to voluntarily go. So our parents, they were like, okay, so you want us to go. Where exactly do you want us to go? This is our country. They didn't want to hear none of that. So after a few more exchange, the next thing we knew, they just started putting us all in handcuffs. Guys, I tell you, as a kid, that was the first time I felt handcuffs on my arms in my whole entire life. Not even in Rwanda, throughout the genocide, nobody has ever touched me and put handcuffs on me, except the machete that got to me. But handcuffs, no. Only flying thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers away did I actually get to meet handcuffs in my arms. And that goes along my siblings. Each and every one of us got arrested on that day in the United States, including our very, very youngest brother, who was really young. And I think actually I may have told you that he was 7. When I did the math, I think he was 9 and not 7. Yeah. He was 9 years old. So all of us got arrested. And of course, as soon as we got arrested, they literally forced us out of the embassy. They forced us out of Rwanda. And they threw us in the United States, or to the United States. And as soon as they did that, then they actually grew some brain afterwards. So they were like, oh shoot, we actually forgot to check IDs, we forgot to check this and that and that. There were some things that they were supposed to have done prior to getting us out of the embassy, but they didn't bother because they came with a purpose of neutralizing the threat, as per the request from the ambassador, Theogene Rudasingwa. So once they threw us outside, we remained in handcuffs for some time. And then they were like, by the way, where are you guys from? And we're like, these guys are either idiots or they just haven't been listening. The same thing we were telling them in the embassy. They asked the same question all over again. So we told them, we are Rwandese people. We are diplomats. You just threw us out of our own country. And you threw us to your own country. We have nowhere else to go. So what are you going to do? So those guys, since they are trained to deal with diplomats and all of that, it's like some senses grew up. So they were like, do you have IDs to prove who you are? Thank God our parents had IDs. So they furnished the IDs and they realized each and every one of us had diplomatic passports. Lo and behold, I do not know how quickly they removed the handcuffs out of us. They so quickly removed the handcuffs. Not only that, they were like, well, there must be some sort of misunderstanding. We did not know. Can you imagine? They threw us out of the embassy. Then they tried to apologize after they had thrown us out of Rwanda to the United States. Minding you, we live in Rwanda. We do not live in the United States. We have no place in the United States to live in. So they quickly called back to the headquarters. They were like, by the way, there seems to be some sort of problem here. The same threat, those Interahamwes, these are diplomats. These are not the Interahamwes. So they were like, by the way, we also throw them out of the embassy. So they sort of like told what had happened. And they tried to call the ambassador. They couldn't find him to sort out the whole mess, because he had lied to them that we were Interahamwe, invading the country. When in truth, not only our parents worked for the embassy, but we were also Rwandese, and legally Rwandese, official diplomats. I mean, it couldn't have gotten any worse. So the first thing that those guys did, they were like, well, let's solve this thing out. Please. There seems to be a mistake here. And let's make sure that we don't quickly go to newspapers. But we didn't really know what that meant, because it was going to be a scandal to find out the United States has arrested a bunch of diplomats, took them straight from their own country, threw them outside of their own country to the United States. And they've never done the due diligence to really investigate as to what was going on. So they were like, well, we cannot find your ambassadors to sort this thing out, and we can't really put you back in the embassy because we still have an order to put you out, even though we realize that you are diplomats from there. So this mess has to be sorted out by the State Department. Given that it was Friday, the State Department, they don't work on Saturday and Sunday. So apparently, they were like, you got to come back on Monday. Now, the next thing with that, we didn't have any place to go. Literally. We did not have anywhere to go. Reminding you that we lived in the embassy. That was our residence. So, what had happened, I don't remember exactly. We had some good friends or some angels who took us in. I think my parents, they may have met a couple of friends, some charity people. And we had to split, I remember, because they couldn't take us all in together. So, we split on that Friday. I only had a book bag, same school clothes, and that's it. And so was everybody. So we went and moved to, I don't remember who took us in, but that Friday night, Saturday and Sunday, we were living at someone who was kind enough to give us a place. But because we are split, everybody pretty much had to sort of like sort it out like that. Monday morning, our parents, they go to the State Department, they come back to the embassy, and the embassy refuses to receive them. Instead, they gave them a letter stating that the ambassador had fired our parents from work. Minding you, an ambassador has no power over any staffs within the embassy. An ambassador cannot fire another diplomat. That has to be done by the Foreign Affairs from the country that has sent you. So, again, they like slip a letter under the door because they didn't want to open, informing our parents that they were fired. So now it gets really tricky. They are fired, and the Foreign Affairs in Rwanda has no idea what was happening. Again, because the ambassador was like a king Apparently, he thought he could run everything the same way they ran it in the jungle. He did what he wanted to do. He would just inform the foreign affairs, but then they realized that's not how the diplomacy works. You actually have to follow some guidelines. So it became a huge mess, a really huge mess. In the meantime, somehow we had to figure out a way to go back to school. We had to figure out a way to find a place to live. I mean, it got rough, y'all. It got rough. It got rough, but then afterwards, by God's grace, we found a place to go. We found a place to live. And we moved there to that new place. And but as rough as it could be, guys, life in America, especially those of you who think that I'm talking about our African brothers and sisters. When you guys text someone like, hey, send me some, send me $50. Send me, I just need $100 from you. Only if you knew what the people who live in these nations go through to find $100, either euro or US dollar. It takes a lot to find that kind of money. And I remember for our parents, since they could not get hired anywhere, the degrees that they had, they were useless in the United States. Everything was useless. So it was the same, it was as if they never even went to school. As soon as they saw that you were African, you could not speak a proper English, who would dare hire you? It was like a doomsday, either way you see it. So, another one of our friends, it was another good friend of ours from Embassy of Burundi. God bless that family. They have been here for a little bit longer than we have. So they got to find out what was happening, what had happened to us. They were like, well, there is a way you can make some money, but I'm not sure if you guys are up to it, because they knew the status of our parents, and the only way to make money was like the kind of way that someone who never went to school will go to. And that was delivering newspaper in Washington, D.C., where you get paid between $5 to $7 an hour. In a proper African English, you get paid $5 USD dollars to $7 USD dollars. You may think that that's a lot, but that's like nothing when you cannot use that money to pay for a place to live, to find food, to find a bus ticket. I mean, it's like it got super rough. And because it was now hustling, crash lesson 101, living in the United States as a nobody. So they took the job and they start hustling. 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. They try to do as many, to deliver as many newspapers as possible. But it wasn't enough money. I mean, guys, I don't even know how they did it, but they literally hustled. And when I say hustle, you guys think you can hustle? Hustle in Washington, D.C. Rough life. Rough life. So, and of course, that required us that we start growing quick. One of our older siblings, he had to get a job. Minding you, we've never had any jobs before. We didn't even know nothing about jobs. There's something in Rwanda they used to call emploi de vacances or something like that. It's like when during the summertime you go to this little fancy place and they give you a little job, and then You do some nonsense work and they pay you. So one of our siblings had to get a job too. Why? He had to pitch in at home. Now think about a parent, like a family, you cannot provide for yourself. Now for the first time, this something we've never had ever in Rwanda, you actually need your kids to pitch in so you could meet ends meet. When I talk about rough, it was rough. I was too young to go get a job. And so are my other siblings. So only one of our siblings was older enough to actually barely get a job. And so he went to work to one of the restaurants in DC. And of course, a $5 job. I think that was the minimum wage or something like that. $5 or $5.25. And of course, he hustled too. Now, there's one thing you guys don't know. When you have to go to class in the morning, and as soon as you finish class like 4, you gotta go to your job at 5, and you work for like 4 hours. By the time you arrive home, you are dead. Can you actually picture someone who's working like that, getting homework done, and you're just a kid? So you can imagine our lives were like turbulent throughout. Given that our parents weren't home, we learned how to sort of like look after ourselves. In the United States, we had to be disciplined. I thank God because our parents were strict. They would say, stay here, and we would stay there, But it was hard. It was really hard. So eventually, we lived like that for quite some times. Our parents slowly, they started to know how the system worked. And I forgot to mention, given that the United States has taken us out of Rwanda, and they realize that they have been duped by the ambassador Theogene Rudasingwa, they basically, on a hush-hush basis, immediately gave us papers to be in the United States. And when I say under the right circumstances, anything is possible in these United States of America. For some of you, you have to wait for years to get papers to legally be in the United States. Based on the scandal that had just taken place, we saw papers, they gave us those legal papers to be in the United States in less than a couple months. I think it was like 2 months max. We had papers to pretty much live like a normal person in the United States. With one problem though, we were not normal US citizens. We didn't know life in the United States, how it operates. And because the channels we went through, we were never given sort of like 101 of how to integrate yourself in the United States. We skipped so many things. For like you who come in the United States as refugees, you have like these agencies that actually help you to be acquainted. We had the United States work. For us, we never had that opportunity. As soon as they gave us those papers, the legal papers to be in the United States, they were like, so now you guys are on your own. You figure it out just like everybody else. And of course, they closed the case. And I think my parents were also forbidden to talk about what had happened in the newspapers. Now, I'm talking about it because I never went under those obligations. I'm not bound by what my parents have signed or whatever. I am my own person and I'm growing up right now. I can say my own testimony. So that's why most of you have never heard of it. These countries, they work in funny ways, guys. They work in funny ways. And of course, the whole thing sort of like dragged for such a long time between the State Department and the Embassy of Rwanda. And then at some point, the Foreign Affairs in Rwanda, they just forgot the whole problem. They literally just wrote it off. Like, oops, they were, no one goes out in Hamwe, which means, oh, they were just in Interahamwe's anyway. And so we sort of like integrated in the United States, as rough as you can imagine, making pennies on the dollars, couldn't use any degrees, couldn't use any of your expertise. So guess what? Depression kicks in. And then it was for the first time I got to see how life becomes when someone who works like in a very high place sees you and they're like, "Ooh, what has happened to you?" It's like you come to the United States, you got all these prestigious accolades, and all of a sudden you look like a nobody. All those people that you will meet in some very, very high places, the next thing when they see you, you're like struggling, you look like a nobody. Man, that's a huge stigma, guys. That didn't go so well to my parents. We talk about depression, y'all, like a serious depression. It's like your life, it's like you die standing. You literally die standing. So many things are gone, guys. So many things have gone by that up to this moment, some of it I don't even know how they deal with it. Us as children, even though it has impacted us, but we're still younger enough to quickly adapt. I remember as soon as I hit 15 years old and 9 months, I quickly went for my driver's license. I could legally drive. And by that time, when I was 15, I had started to hustle myself. Remember, everybody had to pitch in. So my job was to cut grass in our neighborhoods. I would literally go door to door on Fridays and be like, "Can I cut your grass?" And then they will give me like $20, $30, $50. I made money like that. And it was like straight out hustle. And of course, I got enough money. I remember I must have been like 16 or maybe 17. I made a little bit of enough money. I got a little car. That way I could actually move around. And I went and I got a real job in a restaurant too. And because I knew how to hustle, I was like an employee of the month every month. I even became like a manager as a kid, even though I didn't know what that meant. So, but I did hustle. I hustled from 16, 17, and then 18. As soon as I hit 18, school was over, high school was done. I had to prepare to go to college, which was another complete crazy ordeal altogether. But minding you that those years from 1995 all the way to 1999, we lived the most craziest life that you can wish anybody to live. In a land, in a country that is not yours. We talk about where you scream and nobody hears you. We talk about where you can ask for sugar and nobody gives you any. Where you actually know nobody. There's no mercy. in this land. We knew nobody. And the people we knew, most of them, they were like, bye, because we were no longer in the same status as they were. So you can imagine us learning how to crawl like a baby crawls all over again, going up, 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 up. So eventually, in 99, I had to prepare to go to school, to go to college. Rough as hell. Minding you, with that whole struggle, I didn't have as many good grades. I mean, I had good grades, but not enough to give me like a full scholarship. That's what I'm talking about. I had a partial scholarship. I was super bright, brilliant, by the way, at school. It's one of the gifts that God has given me. I was really bright, and but I was so mad that I just couldn't ace everything. I wanted to ace everything in school so I could get like a full scholarship, but I never got to get a full scholarship. Why did that matter? If I had a school scholarship, I could go to school for free. But without a full scholarship, I had to find my own money. Minding you, my parents didn't have any money to take me to school. So where was the money gonna come from? Another problem. But there was something we got to find out that they call the federal Pell Grants. This is the money that the federal government, the United States federal government, gives students to be able to go to school. So, and I'm like, okay, at least I can get that money. It's not free, by the way. It's a loan. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just go ahead and sign up for that. Because one thing that I wanted to become an astronaut ever since I was a kid. Literally, that was one of my goals. So of course, I had enough grades to send me to an engineering school. And then they, as soon as I arrived there, and I was like, I just want to be an astronaut. So I remember them laughing at me. Seriously. They were like, son, what are you smoking? And by the way, I never understood what that meant. Because when they say that, it's an expression. When they say, what are you smoking? They're not literally meaning, what are you smoking? They're trying to say to you, like, are you killing us? So eventually they were like, well, we have people on on PhD degrees still waiting. And you think you're going to become an astronaut tomorrow. You got to get behind the line. So I was like, man, you guys are really killing my dreams up in advance. And so I was like, okay, since they don't want me to become an astronaut, or since it seems like I have to wait for like a bunch of 200 plus engineers waiting on to become astronauts, what else can I do? It so happened that I also loved computers. Since 95, somehow my hands do magics when I touch a machine. So I was like, okay, let me just go to the computer science school and maybe I can pick up a things or two. So I switched and I went to school for like computer science. And then, but even with that, I realized that money that federal government paid, it didn't cover everything. Things like school meals and some other things you would need. It was not enough money. And I'm like, oh my God. So I can ask money to our parents. I can ask money to my brothers, my siblings. Where do I get money from? And that required that I had to literally figure out like how to hustle at school. So you know what I did? So for those of you guys who remember the Napster days, I know some of you know Napster. This was like an app, an IRC. This was like apps that would actually give you things like music, videos, software, all of that. I kid you not, guys. Wait, I think before I tell you that, I think the statute of limitation, yeah, I don't think FBI will catch me. But I remember I found a little business doing transaction through Napsters, just to say the least, because I don't want to get arrested if I do tell you guys what I was doing at school. But using Napsters and IRC, I knew how to find things everybody needed. Things like music, things like software, things like movies. Again, my hands were really crafty. And then I knew how to program, like web pages. I think the internet had just arrived since '95. So I was really good in program by nature. So I did all of that, and then I hustle at school. I literally hustle, doing side jobs like that when I wasn't in school. But then also things at home were not very good, as you can imagine. Life became harder and harder and harder. So I was forced to literally like move out of dorms at school because it was too expensive to be in school with little money. And then eventually I started realizing that the loans I was taking, I didn't have any way to pay them. So I was like, I need to find a small place to live. Minding you, I've never lived by myself before. We're talking about I'm still 18, going 19. So I was like, well, I literally have to move out, find my own place. Back at home, they had lost the place that we were moving in. So they were like homeless. So minding you, I'm at school, things at home are going crazy. They lost the place, they lost the home. So I'm like, man, what am I gonna do? So I leave school, I got no place to go. I'm gonna be an extra, I'm going to be like an extra burden at home. They're already dealing with so much. So I was like, I gotta have to figure out, I have to learn how to become a man, even though I did not know how. So I found a little place of my own, and I lived there. And of course, knowing what was happening at home, crazy life, guys. And when I say crazy, my God, only God knows how rough it was. Remember, they attempted to maintain a $5 job, $6 job for so long, but it was almost impossible. So they lost the place where they lived. So I was like, okay, I gotta find a place cheap enough that they're not gonna kick me out. At least enough for me to manage to go to school, hopefully finish school, and then help at home if I can. But that actually became impossible to even help at home. I was barely making life. You know what it is to live on noodles menudos? Those of you in college, especially here, you know, noodles menudos, Monday through Friday. That was my food back in college. Why? Because I had to pay rent, I had to pay electricity, I had to pay car insurance. I mean, there were these charges that I never knew. It sucked to be an adult, I can put it that way. Because since then, I never had to pay for anything for myself. Everything was always covered by our parents. In the meantime, I remember that my parents were still appealing to the Rwandese government to basically seek justice. But they were being ignored throughout. So eventually, life got super rough. Life got really rough, yo. So I was like, you know what? This life is just not gonna be possible. And given that I had the little gift in programs, one of the companies approached, they came to school, they were like recruiting people to work for them. And I was like, okay, let me see if maybe I can find a real job. Because I remember I was making money through the whole Napsters, and then I had to get a job in a place called Hollywood Video. It's like a video place where they will rent movies and all of that. So I was like, I need to find a really, a job that can pay a little bit more, so at least I could figure out a way to be stable. So one of these huge companies, they come at school, they're like, well, we are recruiting people. So, but they could only recruit juniors. I was not a junior person. I was only like a sophomore when they came. And so I was like, okay, I'm not a junior, nor am I a senior, but I need a job. So they were like, well, we need people who at least have very basic skills that are enough for our entry level. So I was like, what do you guys need? So I was kind of cocky because I wanted to get a job. But honestly, I didn't know what they were offering in terms of exams. Anyway, so they gave me this little exam. And as soon as I saw it, it was like water. I could just drink it like this. So I took that little quiz or that little exam. It was like an entry exam they were giving all the students. And of course, I passed it with like flying colors. As soon as I passed it, they were like amazed, like, dude, what did you say again? Are you a junior or are you a senior? So they were amazed because my level of understanding was much higher than an average person who had passed the exam. So needless to say, they immediately forgot that I wasn't a junior or a senior. They were like, well, welcome aboard. So I got a job. And once I got a job, I was like, okay, thank God. So at that point, I was like, okay, maybe my life can turn around. I can figure out a few things here, perhaps figure out a few things for my mom, my parents and all of that. So I started strategizing to figure out how life could go forward. And that's my story for today. They're telling me that my airtime is over. And since I had told you guys that we are only going to broadcast for 1 hour, I'll continue next time. But in all of that, guys, one thing that I've learned living in the United States is to never take for granted your blessings. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Look at me today, guys. Look at me. I literally have overcome as many challenges since 95. Actually, officially since 99. That's when I first went solo. I first became, I went to be on my own since 1999. I have never been arrested. I've never went through to do drugs. God has protected me throughout. I could have gone in many other places, not so good. But God really protected me. Because I know the same is not true to some of my colleagues that I know of. Up to this very day, I don't know what a drug is. I never experienced it. I never had a desire for it, but I had every opportunity to actually to test it, to venture into it, all of that. So what am I saying? Sometimes it's good to know where you came from. It's really good to know where you came from. We were raised better at home. Our parents, they literally were strict. So even when they weren't there, I could still hear them in the back of my ear saying, heck no, don't do this, don't do that. Their voices kept on ringing in my ears throughout those times that I was alone. It guided me. But also, I'm super grateful to God. Up to this very moment, God is good, guys. I'm a believer. I don't know about you. But I know that if it wasn't for God, that actually enabled us to survive in the United States, when we had $0 in our pocket, $0 in our pocket, mark my words. And here I am today. I'm not hungry today. I have a place to live. I have food. I'm able to help others. I know that there is God. I survived in Rwanda when millions others didn't survive. There is God. I believe that deep within each and every one of us, you have a mission. There is a purpose by which you have to do whatever it is you got to do here on this earth before you depart. And mine, it's still yet to be done, which is why I'm still with you guys. And I intend to do all I have to do. Leave empty. Get all that stuff out of me. Every gift that I have brought to this earth, I want to be able to share it. I'm not going to take it back with me in the cemetery. I am not taking it. And I would hope that even with you, it's the same thing. So with that in mind, guys, shoot us some feedbacks if you have any. I am so grateful that you were able to listen to this program, watch this program. This is one of those subjects that when I'm talking about it, even right now, my stomach, I'm having a stomach problem. It's like I'm nervous, guys, because something that I've never shared before. But I know I have to do it. It's my testimony, and it's my history. It's not easy, but I have to push it and get it out of me. And for the first time, I'm sharing with you all. So those of you who want to leave us some feedbacks, leave us some feedbacks on www.afridominion.com. Our email is info@afridominion.com. And I am Freeman Singirankabo with afridominion.com. I wish you all a super fantastic day. God bless. And until next time, we'll see you.